South Africa's G20 presidency is driving global momentum towards a more inclusive, equitable and sustainable future.
Minister of International Relations and Cooperation Ronald Lamola, flanked by Gauteng Premier Panyaza, Lesufi and Finance Minister Enoch, Godongwana, addressed the media today on the country's commitment to hosting the G20 Leaders Summit.
It's at that briefing where Lamola confirmed once again that the US will not attend the gathering, but he's emphasized that South Africa's participation in the G20 is focused on shaping global affairs and advancing Africa's development agenda.
Preparations for the summit are on track, with numerous heads of states and governments from the G20 member countries, including invited guest countries, have been confirmed for participation. Heads of international organizations, in total 42 countries, are confirmed for participation at various levels. This includes 20 G20 members, excluding the United States, for reasons well known to you. 16 guest countries and 6 countries representing regional economic communities in Africa, the Caribbean and East Africa. The Leaders Summit will take place from the 22nd to the 23rd November 2025. The agenda of the summit will be anchored on the following 3 sessions, namely, Session 1, Inclusive and Sustainable Economic Growth, Leaving No One Behind. Building our economies, the role of trade, financing for development, and the debt burden. Session 2, A Resilient World, the G20's contributions, disaster risk reduction, climate change, just energy transition, food systems. And Session 3, A Fair and a Just Future for all critical minerals, decent work, and artificial intelligence. It is also expected that before taking actions on the South African Leaders Declaration, Summit will take note or adopt the following reports commissioned by our G20 presidents: the Africa Expert Panel, the Extraordinary Committee of Independent Experts on the Global Wealth Inequality, the G20 Review. High-level size events, including the IPSA Leaders Meeting, the Global Fund Aid Replenishment Meeting, the high-level renewable energy pledging event, a Compact with Africa event, a disaster risk reduction meeting, a meeting with Africa heads of state, and special South Africa-EU summit are set to take place on the margins of the Leaders Summit.
All right, let's stay with this particular story now and speak to South Africa's G20 Sous-Sherpa, Ambassador Xolisa Mabhongo. Ambassador, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. It's a few days to go before the Leaders Summit, and the Minister of International Relations saying that about 130 of the 133 meetings have taken place. Let's perhaps start with explaining to our viewers what's still outstanding.
What is outstanding now is a meeting that started yesterday. That is the meeting of the Sherpas of the G20. They are all here in Johannesburg. They are meeting to negotiate the declaration that will be adopted by the heads of state. The second meeting will be the G20 Social Summit, which will take place from the 18th to the 20th. So the Social Summit is a G20 event that brings together civil society, local communities. So people from all over South Africa and the African continent will be participating, making their views known on the issues that are on the agenda of the G20 summit. Mm-hmm. And then the last meeting, of course, is the Leaders Summit itself on the 22nd and 23rd.
And Ambassador, you speak about the meeting, right, that's focusing on the declaration. The minister earlier on saying that South Africa is forging ahead to persuade the other participants in this particular gathering who are present to adopt the Leaders' Declaration. Have there been any challenges in this particular regard of trying to move ahead with that?
The meeting of the Sherpas started yesterday. The mood is very positive. The spirit in the room is one of cooperation, of trying to make sure that we live at the end of the Johannesburg summit, there is a meaningful outcome. So far, we have not yet encountered any difficulties. Mm-hmm. So I can say that the mood in the room is very positive of the countries that are participating. Of course, The only country that is not in the room is the United States. And of course, that is also their choice not to be in the room.
Do you foresee any challenges, for example, as far as the declaration and adopting it is concerned then?
So far, we do not foresee any major challenges. We did receive over the weekend communication from the United States where they indicated that in their absence in the meeting, their preference is that there should be no declaration adopted. However, as the presidency of the G20, this does not depend on us. We are the president, but the G20 is made up of 19 countries, plus the European Union and the African Union. So as the presidency, therefore, we are guided by the views of all G20 members. So you cannot, no country can just make an appeal to the president and say, I'm not in your meeting, so don't have a declaration. But we have not really had any challenges with that in the meeting that started yesterday.
So when it comes to the U.S., right, they did, of course, also say in the public domain, I'm sure you've heard, and I wonder if you've discussed this as well, that they see that the broadening of the agenda has been somewhat of a challenge for them, and they want to whittle it down in order to be able to get to the nitty-gritties, back to the original agenda, and then forge your way forward. What view are you taking as the Sherpas when it comes to this?
Well, first of all, each presidency of the G20, you have the prerogative to set an agenda for a particular year that you are leading the group. So as the Minister Lamola and the President have been saying, when we took over in January, on the 1st of December 2024, we presented 4 priorities for discussion during the year of our presidency. And that has been the focus. So a presidency has got that prerogative. So the United States, when they take over for 2026, they also have that prerogative. But let me mention also a very important initiative that South Africa undertook as well, which is highly appreciated by G20 members. So we also undertook what we call the review of the G20 at 20. You will recall that our G20 presidency is the last in the series of presidencies since the G20 was elevated to a Leaders Summit in 2008 in Pittsburgh. So we would then use this opportunity to say, let us review the G20 at 20 and see its effectiveness, what it has achieved. And through this review, and this review was done in a very consultative way, we did surveys, we did interviews, we were also assisted by technical experts. What came out of the review was that in the bigger scale, the G20 is still important. Of course, there was an acknowledgement that to some extent, the agenda has indeed expanded. But when we reviewed the individual themes that are on the agenda of the G20, we didn't encounter any position, for example, that says in the bigger picture, there are topics that need to be discarded. But this has sparked a conversation that actually an organization like the G20 needs to actually review its work and its status from time to time. And one of the recommendations of this review is that we must do these regular reviews. We must not wait for another 20 years. Let's do them regularly. Maybe every 5 years, we look back at ourselves and say, what are we doing? What have we achieved in a particular 5-year period? So this was a very important initiative that South Africa undertook, and it has been highly appreciated.
And I suppose one of the other, of course, views by South Africa, and especially the goals here, was to ensure that it does not only push South Africa's agenda, but the continent's agenda, right, and amplifying it in terms of development and the priorities so that they find expression in the G20. There is a concern, though, to say that you may have done this now as the president to be able to set up the agenda, but when it comes to next year, when the U.S. takes over, the agenda of the continent may actually not find its way into that agenda. Is it something that you are envisioning, or do you think this will continue?
I think, first of all, I must say that there are 2 drivers of our G20 amongst many, just maybe 2 important ones. The first is that our G20 presidency followed those of Indonesia, India, Brazil. So we had a sequence of 4 presidencies of the G20 from the Global South. And then, of course, the second was the admission of the African Union into the G20 in 2023. What therefore meant is that in the past 4 years, we've actually, through these 4 presidencies of the Global South, we have been trying to advocate for the development agenda to be placed in the center of the agenda of the G20. And I think to a large extent we have managed to really focus the G20 on the development agenda. And of course, coming with the African Union coming on board, it also allowed us as South Africa to bring the pertinent issues that are covered in Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, which are also South Africa's priorities, also into the program of the G20. Now, to answer your question about what will happen to these big priorities next year, I would say that most of the challenges that we are trying to address actually transcend a 1-year presidency by any country. Look at the issues that we have placed on the agenda for our presidency. Disaster risk reduction, the just energy transition, dealing with the debt burden facing many low and middle income countries, as well as the issue of critical minerals. So these issues, we will still be dealing with them in 2027, in 2028 as the G20. So what South Africa has done has been to place them on the agenda of the G20. We did not expect that in 1 year we were going to find all the solutions to these 4 areas. What we did was to place them on the agenda so that they can be discussed by the G20 presidencies in the coming years. So we would not be really worried that this agenda that we placed will fall apart. It will still be relevant in 2027. It will be relevant in 2028. And therefore, we are quite hopeful.
Quickly, in about 20 seconds, Ambassador, let's speak about the optics, because President Cyril Ramaphosa has been reiterating that he doesn't want to hand over to an empty chair. And this raises questions to say, without the U.S. in the room, how then will the handover be done?
Clearly, there will be no handover in the room, because the U.S. government has officially written to us and said, indeed, they will not be participating in the summit at all. So there will be no representation by anyone from the U.S. government at the summit. So what we expect is simply that on the 1st of December, when our presidency ends on the 30th of November, the U.S. will simply assume the presidency of the G20 for the coming year. And remember, the issue of the U.S. being the president of the G20 in 2026 was already agreed upon in the summits in India, in the summit in Brazil last year. So if you look at the declarations of New Delhi and that of Rio, they already make it clear there that the U.S. will be the president in 2026. So, of course, we would have loved the U.S. to be in the room, but they have chosen not to be there. So our assessment is that we will then complete our G20 presidency on the 30th of November. And then the U.S. will then assume the presidency and then announce to the rest of the membership of the G20 what their priorities are for 2026.
Ambassador, appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for talking to us.